Why do you make the things that you make? This is a question that I've thought a lot about over the almost 2 decades of being a creative in many different fields, and I think it's perhaps the most important question when it comes to creating anything, really. The answer to this question gives you intention. It can give you drive, motivation, a sense of aspiration. It can provide you with direction and focus and meaning, but most of all, it gives you clarity. How you do anything in life is how you do everything in life. And so your bar of excellence is always going to be your lowest common denominator. It's easy to see people who approach photography or any one of their creative endeavors with a blasé mindset, regardless of whether it's something they want to make a career out of or it's just a hobby that they have. And a lot of the time, you can really up the standard of your approach to learning your craft by simply just asking this question to align yourself and understand your real intentions. Why do you make the things that you make? What's the purpose behind your photography? This is the second portion of what we talked about yesterday about style. The how of photography is something that you're learning right now with this course. You're learning the craft of what photography is. But remember, the why of style, the what of style is what the art of photography is. Why do you want to learn photography? What's the story there? How did it come about? What's the short-term goal? What's the long-term goal? How is photography going to fit into your life? Is there a purpose that you're trying to fulfill? Now, I'm not posing these questions and expecting only serious answers or anything like that. At every stage of your journey, whether that's right now or 10 years down the track, it never ever really needs to be all that serious. Art can be about anything and have any meaning so long as it has intention, and you've heard me say that before. So take the weight off your shoulders. The why of a person who wants to uncover truth in a war via investigative photojournalism is just as valid as the why of a person who wants to document their groceries every day. One purpose might seem a little bit more noble, but they're just both as valid as each other so long as there's meaning and purpose found in the execution of those activities. And if you're struggling, it helps to build your purpose and gradually think about it over the course of years and consistently experiment and refine your purpose and watch your work change along with it. It might help to have some examples in this area so that you can not only get a better understanding, but also so that you can get some inspiration towards your own purpose and meaning. So during the rest of the lesson, I'll tell you why I do photography, and then I'll go through a couple of examples of others that I've heard of that, I think are really interesting as well, and that I think that some people could find inspirational or align with. So for me at first, photography was a means to adventure. The first camera that I ever owned was one that one of my exes bought for me. And I remember I asked for it because at the time our relationship was really struggling. We had been together for 6 years and there was no more spark and no more excitement in that relationship, and I wanted to fix it. And I thought that going on adventures and seeking novel experiences would add some passion and some fire to it. And spoiler, it didn't. And so Christmas was coming up and she asked me what I wanted as a present, and I said a camera. And the camera at the time was just a side thing. I used the excuse of, wanting to go and make memories together and record them in pictures as the justification for getting the camera. I didn't even know how to use one. I just used the camera as a means for adventuring with my ex-girlfriend. Anyway, long story short, it didn't end up working out, but I was left with a camera. And as part of my healing process and moving on with my life, I realized that I really did enjoy traveling and having novel experiences. And so I decided to learn photography with the camera that she had bought me. And that's where it all really kind of started. And since then, while I've refined my purpose quite a lot over the years, which I will share with you in just a moment, for me, photography has always been about adventure, always been about novel experiences, always been about documentation. And I've always had a really crappy memory for like life events and experiences that have happened in my life. It's like I've had a leaky memory for those kind of things. And Something that really drew me to photography was the ability for a photograph to transport me back to a memory that I thought I had long forgotten about. Nowadays, specifically when it comes to my photographic work, more so than the teaching that I find myself engaging in right now, my photography is about the documentation of people, places, and cultures. And I explore them through the themes of contrast and contradiction. And this statement is almost like my mission statement, right? Like, when you're making a business and like you're trying to think of that like one liner so that your entire company can rally around it. So, there's a lot to unpack in that statement. But at a high level, the documentation of people, places, and cultures is really still about the adventure and novel experiences. But something that really changed when it comes to the direction of my work and my life is travel. I never really got into travel all that much when I was growing up. And because I was a big self learner, I didn't have a tertiary education. And instead, I went straight into the workforce after school and I learned everything on my own in the after hours. Because of that, I didn't really end up traveling until I was like 25. But once I had started traveling, I got addicted to it. I got addicted to seeing, other cultures and the people within them. I got obsessed with seeing how people live in different parts of the world. And it was so interesting to me because most of the time it was very much different to mine. And in the pursuit of following this interest of travel, the documentation of that became one of my main focuses. Whether that was taking photos of my experience from a more journalistic perspective, or whether it was deliberately making photos that showcase the beauty of a location so that I could then share it with others and inspire them to travel to those locations as well. And I find myself interested in the people, the places, and the cultures of these countries in my travels. I found that these three things were really the heart of a country, that all three of these things really shape one another and really helped me understand a country and the experience of life within it. While I now consider my job as a travel photographer being to really understand and showcase the people, places, and cultures of a country through inspiring people with my photography and showing them what they could expect, I would say that, it's also my passion to just adventure and make photos so that I can remember the experiences there. Because if I don't take photos, then honestly, I'll probably forget because my memory sucks. And it was really as simple as that. One thing that has really changed a lot for me over the years, though, is the understanding and the refinement of how I capture the people, places, and cultures. And I mentioned that I explore themes of contrast and contradiction. And that's because I've traveled all over the world. And in every single country that I've been to, in every culture that I've experienced, people all over the world, we're all the same. We're all just humans trying to live our lives in the best way at the end of the day. But we're also big, living, breathing contradictions. In the examination of people all over the world, for me, it's easy to see that we're all the same. We're all human. But what has made it interesting for me is seeing how we're all different, how we can have conflicting preferences, how we can have cultures or beliefs that clash against one another, how we can have perspectives that vary wildly from one person to the next, and yet, despite all of that, still live harmoniously in a culture together. At a day-to-day photography level, contrast and contradiction are themes that I explore not only in the subjects that I shoot that show off these differences, but also in the approach that I take to tonal contrast and the simplification of subjects as well. I'm always looking for scenes that either have a lot of shadow or bright areas, or scenes where there are simple subjects in complex environments, or vice versa. And while I don't always hit all of these themes all the time, these are just a few of the ways that inspire me to shoot in the way that I shoot. They're the things that inform the places that I go to, the way that I decide what scenes to take photographs of, and even down to how I compose them. And over time, I've stuck with these themes and evolved them over my career. So now I have many years worth of a body of work that I can show people. And many people over the years have approached me to say that they can easily recognize my style. Now, Keep in mind that all of this understanding, all of this story has taken me quite a long time to develop and to understand, both about myself and about the direction that I want to take my future photography work. And remember, I've been a creative for almost 20 years, so don't expect to be able to come up with all of this on your own on your first try. That's just way too much pressure and most likely not going to be that helpful for you at the beginning stages of your photography journey. Rather, keep in mind that everyone has their own purpose in the journey of photography, and that having a very high level understanding of why you want to create the things that you create allows you to have a lot more clarity over your work and therefore a lot more direction in your work as well. Sitting down and really understanding this makes the entire journey just a lot more enjoyable from every aspect, in my opinion, and it's something that I highly recommend that every creative engage in. I hope this has really started to get you thinking about what your why could be and working on that and evolving it over time. Everyone's purpose is really personal and it's very rare that people will share it publicly, so it can be hard to find out exactly what it is. However, what is easy to spot are the themes across a body of work from a photographer. And once you spot a theme, you can then expose yourself to the rest of their work and start to understand where it came from and why it came to be. Let's go through some of the themes that I've come across in my career that I find interesting. So, I found some people have a really big thing around timelessness. They have personal stories that revolve around the idea of making their images stand the test of time for one reason or another. Perhaps in their past, something in their past caused them to think this way, or perhaps they grew up with an influence that led them there. But how I've seen this manifest itself is through really thoughtful and considered compositions, doing everything that they can to make sure that their images are, when they're viewed in the future, they don't age and they can be enjoyed by many generations to come. And this means that they don't engage in trends. Some of them don't even shoot subjects that show any kind of age, like clothing or signs. Some of them use black and white only. This theme of timelessness can really come from any direction and manifest itself in many different ways. As another theme, I've seen a lot of photographers gravitate towards the idea of energy and excitement in their images. They look for action. They look for dynamic images with lots of movement, lots of color, lots of saturation, lots of emotion. Most of the time, you can see a photographer use a similar color palette or color theme through an entire body of work. Or maybe you might see a series of a particular dynamic movement. I've seen many, many bodies of work that focus on the idea of explosions of color. And you can only imagine what kind of person who created it and, what kind of purpose they have in their lives for expressing themselves through photography. Another theme I really enjoy is the idea of flow. I've seen quite a few works around this theme actually, where photographers will photograph or create scenes at very high shutter speeds where the subject is usually something flowy, like a piece of cloth or the dress of a dancing woman or the slow ripples from the waves of an ocean, right? Or something like that. It's always very, very interesting to me because this style is very much about detail as much as it is going with the flow, and there's a tension and a contrast there that I think is really nice. And all of these themes are just examples. But remember that the way you spot them is by exposing yourself to people's bodies of works. And I don't mean a single image. You can't stop there. That doesn't tell you anything about a person. You have to look at their entire body of work and how a single piece fits into the whole to really get an understanding of them as a person and why they create the things that they create. And that leads me to today's assignment. Another research one. So what I want you to do is find 3 photographers with different bodies of work. Define what the general theme is to that body of work. Then find the history of that photographer and understand why they created that body of work in the first place. Some great details to uncover are their backstory, their history, their decision-making process, their reasoning for creating art, and their capture process. you'll find out just how diverse people are, and you'll find their reasonings to be even more diverse. This is certainly a good way to get inspiration for understanding yourself in the context of expressing yourself through photography. So I hope you enjoy this one today. It's one that's fun to me. And as always, if you feel up to it, share your favorites and talk about them in this lesson's comments. All right, I'll see you tomorrow.